My name is Audrey Monroe. As an interior designer, I create sanctuaries, but the nursery for my unborn daughter, Rose, was my masterpiece. In the heart of our sprawling Plano home, it was a promise rendered in soft whites and pale pinks, a fortress of love. My charismatic husband, Grant Sterling, called it perfect. My best friend since college, Blair Ashwood, said it had soul. They were the two pillars of my seemingly flawless life. Their support was my foundation. Grant, a rising star in wealth management, was the picture of the doting husband. Blair, a whirlwind of social energy, was the self-appointed planner of my baby shower and my closest confidant. The perfect house, the perfect life, and now the perfect baby, she'd said, smiling at us. You're making the rest of us look bad. In our world, where reputation was everything, we laughed, because we knew it was the highest compliment. My meticulous nature is what led to the camera. With contractors still finishing the last details, installing a nanny cam early seemed practical. It's to keep an eye on the workmen, I explained to Grant and Blair over dinner. You know how I am. They knew. It was a perfect excuse. Grant, ever supportive, said, "Whatever gives you peace of mind, my love." Blair even applauded the idea, calling it a power move. The next day, a technician installed a tiny, almost invisible camera in the corner of the ceiling. A high-end device with a secure cloud-based app. I saw it as just another tool to ensure my sanctuary remained pristine. I had no idea I wasn't installing a security device. I was setting up a front-row seat to the complete and utter demolition of my world. The first tremor in my perfect world was almost imperceptible. It began with Grant's schedule. The man who had always prided himself on his work-life balance, on being home for dinner every night, suddenly had a new, all-consuming client. "The Harrington account is a monster, Aud," he'd say, kissing me goodbye in the morning. "But if I land it, we're talking a whole new level." The late nights started piling up. First, it was 8 p.m., then 9. Soon, he was coming home long after I'd gone to bed, smelling faintly of a restaurant I'd never been to. His excuses a smooth blend of financial jargon and feigned exhaustion. I tried to be the supportive wife, leaving plates of food warming in the oven, but a quiet unease began to curdle in my stomach. Naturally, I confided in Blair. We were sitting in my kitchen, the late afternoon sun streaming through the windows, and I voiced my gentle concern. "It's just, he seems so distant lately." Blair stirred her tea, her expression a careful mask of sympathy. "Oh, honey, he's about to be a father. He's probably just in panic mode, trying to secure your future. You know how men are, they get weird." She reached across the table and patted my hand. "Honestly, I think you're just being a little hormonal. Pregnancy brain is a real thing. You're nesting and feeling vulnerable, so you're seeing shadows where there's nothing. Don't push him away by being paranoid." Her words were meant to be soothing, but they felt like a dismissal. She was telling me my instincts were a symptom, a side effect of my condition. I let it go, telling myself she was probably right. Who was I to argue with a woman who knew me better than anyone? A week later, I was reviewing our joint bank statements, preparing for our quarterly tax payments, when I saw it. A wire transfer for $15,000 to a company I'd never heard of. Apex Lifestyle Ventures. It wasn't a stock purchase or a bond. It was a clean payment. When Grant got home that night, I asked him about it, keeping my tone light and casual. He barely glanced at the statement I held out. "Oh, it's a bridge investment for the Harrington account. Complicated portfolio stuff, you wouldn't get it." He smiled that charming smile that always made his clients sign on the dotted line. "Don't you worry your beautiful head about it. That's what you have me for." The condescension was so subtle, so wrapped in a compliment, that I almost missed it. But I didn't. For the first time, his words felt less like a comfort and more like a wall. The cracks kept appearing. One Saturday, Blair came over to help me sort through baby clothes. As she moved through the living room, a flurry of motion and chatter, She knocked a small porcelain music box off the mantelpiece. It shattered on the hardwood floor. It had been my grandmother's, the last thing she gave me before she passed. A choked gasp escaped my lips. Blair stared at the pieces for a moment. Her lips pursed in annoyance. "Oh shoot. Oops," she said, her tone flat. "Well, it was pretty old, wasn't it?" Without another word of apology, she turned back to the pile of onesies. "Anyway, do you think we should go with classic white for the coming home outfit? Or something with a little more pop?" The coldness of her reaction was a physical shock. The music box wasn't just an object. It was a memory, and she had swept away its destruction as if it were dust. The final, undeniable fissure happened on a Tuesday evening. I came home early from a client meeting, letting myself into the quiet house. I heard Grant's voice from his home office, low and tense. It was a phone call. "No, it's not the right time," he was saying, his voice sharp. She's watching everything. We have to be more careful, Blair." My heart stopped. "Blair?" I stood frozen in the hallway as he continued. "Just stick to the plan. A few more weeks is all we need." He must have sensed my presence because he suddenly fell silent. A moment later, he walked out of the office, his phone already in his pocket. When he saw me, a flicker of panic crossed his face before being replaced by that easy smile. "Audrey, you're home early, sweetheart." "I was just talking to Blair," he said, a little too quickly. "We were just planning a little surprise for you. A push present. She was telling me I had terrible taste and needed her help." The lie was so blatant, so poorly constructed, it was an insult to my intelligence. His tone had been anything but celebratory. It had been the voice of a co-conspirator. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every red flag, every dismissive comment, every strange occurrence played on a loop in my mind. Grant's late nights, Blair's advice to ignore my gut, the money, the broken music box, the phone call. None of it made sense individually, but together, it painted a hideous, distorted picture I couldn't yet bring into focus. My logical mind screamed for an explanation, for a piece of concrete evidence that would either confirm my fears or, God willing, prove them to be the hormonal delusions Blair insisted they were. And then I remembered. The camera. The silent, all-seeing eye in the corner of the nursery. A constant, objective witness, haunted by an unshakable feeling of dread. I slipped out of bed, crept into my office, and picked up my tablet. My hands trembled as I opened the app. I just needed a logical explanation. I just needed to see the painters had left a mess, or the cleaning crew had moved something. I just needed to prove that the shadows were only shadows. My finger hovered over the icon for the live feed. My heart pounding a frantic, desperate rhythm against my ribs. The screen of the tablet was cool against my fingertips, a stark contrast to the heat rising in my throat. The house was silent around me, a deep, heavy quiet that seemed to press in from all sides. I tapped the icon, a cheerful cartoon cloud, and the app loaded. For a second, the live feed showed me exactly what I expected to see. The nursery, bathed in the soft, ethereal glow of the nightlight. Peaceful and still. My rocking chair was in its corner. The tiny fawn on the wall seemed to be sleeping. My heart rate slowed for a fraction of a second. "See?" I told myself. "Nothing. You're just tired." But I wasn't looking for what was happening now. I was looking for an answer to what had already happened. My thumb scrolled to the motion-activated recordings. There were dozens of entries, mostly from the contractors. I scrolled back, my eyes scanning the timestamps. I stopped on a recording from 3 nights ago, 10:17 p.m., the night Grant had come home after midnight, claiming the Harrington deal had hit a last-minute snag. My finger, trembling slightly, pressed play. The video flickered to life. The empty nursery. For a full minute, nothing happened. I was about to dismiss it as a glitch when the door opened. It wasn't a contractor. It was Grant. He stepped inside, looked back into the hallway, and then beckoned someone to follow. And then she appeared. Blair. My Blair. She was laughing. a low, throaty sound that didn't belong in this room. She put a finger to her lips, a playful shushing motion, as Grant closed the door behind them, plunging the room into the dimness of the nightlight. My breath caught in my chest. What were they doing? A surprise? The push present he'd lied about? My mind scrambled for a rational explanation, a lifeline to cling to, but their movements were not the movements of people setting up a surprise. They moved with a slick, conspiratorial ease. Grant's hands were on her waist. Her arms were around his neck, and then they were kissing. A deep, hungry kiss that was utterly alien and horrifying to witness. It wasn't a mistake, not a fleeting moment of weakness. It was familiar, practiced, the world tilted on its axis. The air in my office grew thin, impossible to breathe. This isn't real, my mind chanted. It's a dream, a nightmare. You're going to wake up. But I didn't wake up. Instead, I watched as my husband, the man who held my hand during every ultrasound, and my best friend, the woman I'd chosen to be my daughter's godmother, moved toward the center of the room, toward the crib. A wave of nausea so profound it almost buckled me over, washed through my body. No, not there. Anywhere but there. But that's exactly where they went. He lifted her, and she giggled as he placed her inside the custom-built ashwood crib. On the organic mattress I had chosen for my daughter's perfect, peaceful sleep, they defiled it. In the single most sacred space I had ever created, they committed the ultimate act of desecration. The little mobile of silver stars I had painstakingly hung just last week swayed gently above their heads. The sound in the room was a low, guttural noise of pain. It took me a moment to realize it had come from me. My world wasn't collapsing. It had already collapsed. This was just the dust settling, revealing the raw, gaping void where my life used to be. Every shared laugh, every promise, every memory with both of them, was now a lie. A carefully constructed piece of theater for an audience of one, me. The tears I expected didn't come. The scream that was building in my lungs died before it could make a sound. Something else took over. A chilling, terrifying calm washed over the inferno of my pain, extinguishing it like a chemical fire suppressant. The heat vanished, replaced by ice. My hands, which had been shaking, were now perfectly still. The designer in me, the part of my brain that sees a demolished building not as a tragedy but as a site with foundations that need to be assessed, took control. I was no longer a wife. I was no longer a friend. I was an architect surveying the ruins. My finger moved with a new deliberate precision. I swiped out of the current video and began to scroll back through the timeline. 2 weeks ago. Emotion alert at 11:42 p.m. I clicked it. There they were again. 3 weeks before that, another alert. The same scene. A month ago. 6 weeks. It wasn't a recent mistake. It was a pattern. A ritual. They had been using my daughter's nursery, my sanctuary, as their sordid little clubhouse for months. Each video was another layer of betrayal. Another confirmation of the depth of their deception. I kept watching, my face illuminated by the cold blue light of the tablet. I didn't feel pain anymore. I didn't feel anything at all. I just watched, and I downloaded. I watched, and I saved. Every laugh, every kiss, every single second of their treachery. I was gathering my materials. Because you don't cry when your masterpiece is destroyed. You collect the evidence, you document the damage, and you begin to draw up the blueprints for what you will build in its place. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that what I was about to build would be their ruin. The first night, I had been a victim. The second night, I became a student. By the third night, I was a hunter. The ice that had formed in my veins didn't thaw. It sharpened. Each night, after Grant had fallen into the deep, untroubled sleep of the morally bankrupt, I would slip into my office. The tablet became my textbook, the nursery my field of study. I created a spreadsheet, cross-referencing the video timestamps with our shared calendar, with credit card statements, with Grant's fabricated stories of late nights with the Harrington account. I wasn't watching as a wife anymore. I was an intelligence officer gathering intel on an enemy state. My initial focus had been on the visual horror of their betrayal, the physical act. I would fast forward through the aftermath, unable to bear the sound of their voices, but on the fourth night, I forced myself to stop. To understand the full scope of the demolition, I had to listen to the architects discuss their work. I pressed play on the audio of a video from 2 weeks prior, my finger hovering over the mute button, getting impatient. Grant. Blair's voice, a petulant whine that was suddenly grating, filled the silence of my office. She's so placid. I keep telling her she's hormonal and crazy, and she just sort of absorbs it. I thought she'd have had a full-blown meltdown by now. Grant's chuckle was low and condescending. Patience, B. Audrey's a planner. She processes. She doesn't explode. That's what makes her so predictable. Her strength is her weakness. We just have to keep applying pressure. The pregnancy is the perfect cover. Every time she questions something, you just whisper, hormones. Every time she gets suspicious, I just tell her she's nesting. It's working perfectly. I listened, my expression unchanging, as they mocked my trust, my love, my very nature. They spoke of me as if I were a project, a problem to be managed and, eventually, disposed of. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a hostile takeover. Night after night, I listened. And the full, monstrous scope of their conspiracy unfurled. It was far, far worse than I could have imagined. Once the baby's here, it's game time, Grant said in one recording, his voice confident. The sleep deprivation, the postpartum hormones, it's the perfect storm. We'll push every button. I'll question her competence with Rose. You'll be there as the concerned friend, documenting every little slip-up. By the time I file for divorce, we'll have a mountain of evidence that she's an unfit, unstable mother. Blair's reply was eager. And you'll file for sole custody? Sole custody, he confirmed. The house is in my name. The courts will see a stable, concerned father and a hysterical, overwhelmed new mother. You'll be my star witness. They'll hand her to me on a silver platter. My hand instinctively went to my stomach, a cold dread seeping into me. Rose. They were planning to take my daughter. This was their plan all along, to use the baby I was lovingly carrying as a pawn to destroy me. But the conspiracy didn't end with my child. It extended to my life's work. The business is the real prize, Grant explained in another video, his voice filled with a greedy excitement. I've been advising her for months to restructure her accounts. She thinks I'm helping her be more tax efficient. He laughed, a sound so ugly it made my skin crawl. I've been creating a paper trail a mile long, funneling payments through that Apex account, making it look like she's hiding income, cooking the books. By the time I'm done, her reputation will be in tatters. No one will hire a designer who can't even manage her own finances. Apex Lifestyle Ventures. The $15,000 transfer. It all clicked into place. It wasn't a bridge investment. It was the first step in the plan to frame me. The final piece, the nail that sealed the coffin of their fate, came from a recording just 1 week old. They were lying in the crib, whispering in the dark like teenagers. Blair sounded worried. Are you sure this is going to work, Grant? It feels like we're juggling a lot of knives. It'll work because she trusts us, he said, his arrogance absolute. And because I have no other choice. The Harrington account isn't real, Blair. The feds are sniffing around my biggest client's portfolio. I've got a massive hole to fill. And fast. He paused, and I could almost hear the cruel smile in his voice. Once we have the business and the house, we'll have all the capital we need to cover my tracks and launch your brand globally. Audrey's design firm will become the seed money for your empire. It's perfect, poetic even. There it was. The grand design. My husband wasn't just cheating. He was a criminal. A fraud. and he was planning to burn my entire life to the ground to save himself. My best friend wasn't just a backstabber, she was his accomplice, willing to help him steal my child and my company, so she could build her vapid influencer career on the ashes. I finally stopped the recording. I closed the app and shut the tablet. I didn't need to see any more. I had the blueprints, the schematics, the complete architectural plans of their treachery. They thought they were building their future. They had no idea they were only designing their own prison. And I, Audrey Monroe, the woman who created perfect spaces, would be the one to ensure every single bar was perfectly placed. I woke the next morning before the alarm, a full 10 minutes before the sun began to bleed over the horizon. I turned my head on the pillow and looked at the man sleeping beside me, Grant. His face, so handsome and peaceful in the soft morning light, was no longer the face of my husband. It was a mask. I felt nothing. No surge of pain, no echo of love. The grief had burned itself out overnight, leaving behind not ash, but something hard and dense, like coal under pressure, waiting for a spark to ignite. The victim who had cried herself to sleep was gone. In her place was a woman with a job to do. I slid out of bed and went through the motions of our morning routine. A flawless performance of domestic tranquility. I made coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen, when Grant came downstairs, knotting his expensive silk tie. I greeted him with a soft smile and a kiss on the cheek. His skin felt like a stranger's. "You were out so late again, honey," I said, my voice a perfect imitation of the slightly weary, loving wife he expected. "The Harrington deal must be a real beast." He sighed dramatically, accepting the mug of coffee I offered. "The worst. But it'll all be worth it for you and Rose." He squeezed my shoulder. "How are you feeling? Not too tired?" "A little," I admitted, touching my stomach. "She was kicking up a storm last night. I think she's going to be a fighter." "She gets that from her mother," he said, and the irony was so thick I could have choked on it. He finished his coffee, kissed me again, a dry, meaningless press of lips, and left for the office, completely oblivious. He saw a hormonal, nesting pregnant woman. He had no idea he had just been assessed, analyzed, and dismissed by the architect of his own ruin. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I moved. My first call wasn't to my mother, or to a therapist. It was to a name I'd pulled from a discreet search of the city's most notorious litigators. The name was Catherine Croft. Her reputation preceded her. A legal shark with a penchant for publicly dismantling wealthy, narcissistic men. Her secretary was a gatekeeper, but I was prepared. "I need to speak with Miss Croft directly," I said, my voice calm and firm. "Tell her it's regarding a high-asset divorce, with irrefutable video and audio evidence of adultery, conspiracy to commit financial fraud, and a premeditated plot to subvert a future custody battle." There was a pause, then a click. 2 seconds later, a new voice, sharp and clear as crystal, came on the line. "This is Catherine Croft. You have 5 minutes to convince me this isn't a waste of my time." I convinced her in 2. My next stop was a climate-controlled storage facility on the industrial side of town. I used my business license to rent a 10 by 10 unit under my company's name, paying in cash for the first 6 months. The space was cold, anonymous, and perfect. The stark gray concrete walls and single, harsh fluorescent light were a necessary antidote to the beautifully curated lie of my home. This was not a place for emotion. This was a place for work. I spent the afternoon turning it into my war room. I brought in a folding table, a chair, a new, untraceable laptop, a set of burner phones, and a large, rolling whiteboard. Back at home, while Grant was supposedly wooing his fictional client, I began the most critical task. I plugged an encrypted external hard drive into my office computer and initiated the download. Every single video file from the Nanny cam's cloud storage. Hours of footage. I sat there, my face impassive, as the progress bar slowly crawled across the screen, archiving their every betrayal. When the first drive was full, I started on a second, and then a third. One would go to Catherine Croft. One would go into a safe deposit box, and one would stay with me, in the war room. I was creating redundancies, just as I would for any complex design project. No single point of failure. That evening, I stood before the pristine white surface of the whiteboard in my cold, quiet command center. The air smelled of concrete and metal. I picked up a black dry erase marker, the cap making a satisfying click as I removed it. My handwriting was as it always was, the neat, precise script of an architect. I wasn't storyboarding a living room anymore. I was outlining a demolition. At the top of the board, I wrote the project title, Operation Rose. Below it, I wrote the 4 phases of the plan, the strategic cornerstones of my coming vengeance. 1. Secure assets. 2. Gather intel. 3. Set the traps. 4. Public execution. I stepped back and looked at my work. The path forward was no longer a fog of pain and confusion. It was a clear, linear progression. A project plan. Grant and Blair saw me as a casualty in their greedy little war. They were about to find out I was the strategist, the general, and the entire damn army. The game wasn't over. It had just begun, and I was the one making the rules now. Phase 1 began on a Tuesday. My meeting with Catherine Croft was in a steel and glass tower in downtown Dallas that seemed to scrape the sky. Her office was minimalist, immaculate, and overlooked the entire city. Catherine herself was a woman carved from granite, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a voice that could cut through steel. She didn't offer sympathy, she offered strategy. "He feels superior to you," Catherine stated. Her fingers steepled as she reviewed the copies of my financial documents. "He believes he's smarter, and he believes you are too emotional to see past his charm. This is our greatest advantage. We will use his arrogance as a weapon against him." She was the one who found the tool. Buried in the paperwork from when we bought our house was a limited power of attorney I had given Grant. And, more importantly, one he had given me. It was a standard document, meant to allow one of us to sign real estate papers if the other was unavailable. It had long since been forgotten. By him, at least. "This is still valid," Catherine said, a thin, predatory smile touching her lips. "It gives you the authority to act on his behalf in specific financial matters, including the opening and managing of accounts related to joint property which, by Texas law, your business technically island, he will never see it coming." Armed with a certified copy of the document, I walked into a downtown branch of a national bank where Grant had no connections. I was no longer just Audrey Monroe, interior designer. I was Audrey Monroe, a woman on a mission. My pregnancy a source of strength, not fragility. I sat down with the bank manager, a polished and professional woman named Miss Albright, and laid out my case. I was restructuring my business's finances ahead of my maternity leave, and needed to open a new, primary account under my company's name. I presented the power of attorney with unwavering confidence. Miss Albright reviewed the document, made a few calls to verify its authenticity, and within an hour, Monroe Design Firm had a new, shielded, and completely secret bank account. That afternoon, from the sterile quiet of my war room, I began the meticulous process of rerouting my company's lifeblood. I sent out a professionally worded email to my entire client list, informing them of a systems upgrade. Effective immediately, all future payments were to be directed to a new account. To them, it was a piece of corporate housekeeping. To me, it was the turning of a key in a lock, securing my fortress wall by wall. The flow of money into our shared accounts, the funds Grant had been watching and plotting to control, would slow to a trickle and then stop completely. The performance at home became my second job. I played the part of the slightly overwhelmed, financially naive wife to perfection. One evening, Grant came into my office while I was sketching, a stack of papers in his hand. "Honey, I was looking over our finances," he began, his tone oozing with false concern. "Things are a little disorganized. I was thinking, why don't we consolidate your business accounts with my main portfolio? I can manage it all, get you a better return, Simplify things before the baby comes. It'll be one less thing for you to worry about. It was the move I'd been waiting for. I looked up at him. My expression a carefully crafted blend of gratitude and confusion. Oh, Grant, that's so thoughtful. But it all sounds so complicated. I feigned a pregnancy-induced brain fog. Could you do me a huge favor and just email me the details of what you're proposing? All the account numbers you'd need, the transfer authorizations, everything. That way I can just forward it to my assistant to handle the paperwork. My head is just swimming lately. His face lit up. He thought I was handing him the keys to the kingdom. Of course, my love. Anything for you, he said, kissing my forehead. The next morning, the email was in my inbox, a detailed written confession of his intent to take control of my finances. I forwarded it directly to Catherine's secure server. Another piece of evidence locked away. My next move was to protect what I could of our shared assets. Guided by Catherine, I identified a series of joint stock holdings and mutual funds that I could legally liquidate without his signature. It wasn't everything, but it was a substantial sum. The money didn't go into my new account. It went into the creation of an irrevocable trust. The Rose Monroe Future Fund. I signed the papers in a lawyer's office, my hand steady. This money was no longer mine or his, it belonged to my daughter. It was fireproof, sealed away from Grant's greed forever. It was the first foundation stone of the new life I would build for us. Finally, Catherine made the last introduction. His name was Arthur Pence. A forensic accountant in his late 60s with pale eyes, and a quiet demeanor that belied a mind like a steel trap. He didn't look like a warrior, but Catherine assured me he was a bloodhound. We met in a discreet conference room. I didn't give him the videos. Not yet. I gave him something much simpler. This is a bank statement from 3 months ago, I said, pointing to the single line item. A $15,000 transfer to a company called Apex Lifestyle Ventures. Grant told me it was a bridge investment. I need to know what it really island. Arthur took the document, placing it in his briefcase. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. Mrs. Monroe, he said, his voice soft but precise. The numbers in a person's life tell a story often, a more honest one than their words. Allow me to see what story these numbers are telling. As he walked away, I knew I had just unleashed a silent hunter on Grant's trail of lies. The shield was up. The next phase was about to begin. With my financial fortress secured, it was time to go on the offensive. Phase 2, gather intel, and Phase 3, set the traps, were not sequential. They were designed to run in parallel, a symphony of deception where every note was perfectly timed. My primary instruments were the fatal flaws of my enemies, Blair's ravenous hunger for social validation and Grant's bottomless ego. I chose a chic cafe in Highland Park for my meeting with Blair. A place where the clientele consisted of women whose lunches were funded by divorce settlements. I played my part. The overwhelmed and exhausted expectant mother, rubbing my temples and sighing heavily. I just can't do it, Blair, I said, my voice trembling slightly. The baby shower? Everyone expects something spectacular, and I don't have the energy to even think about it. Blair's eyes, which had been scanning the room for important faces, snapped to mine. A flicker of avarice, so quick I would have missed it a month ago, crossed her features. Oh honey, of course you don't, you need to rest, but it has to be perfect, I continued, twisting my napkin. Grant is insisting. He wants this to be the times event of the season, a real celebration of us. Of Rose. He said to spare no expense. I looked at her, my eyes wide with manufactured desperation. I can't think of anyone else I would trust to do it. Your taste is impeccable. You know everyone. Please, Blair, will you plan it for me? All of it? It was like offering a starving wolf a steak. Her face lit up with a predatory glee she barely managed to mask with concern. Audrey, of course I will. For you? For baby Rose? Anything. Don't you worry about a single thing. I will make this the most talked about baby shower Plano has ever seen. The next day, I handed her a platinum credit card linked to the one joint account I had left untouched. an account I now knew was being meticulously monitored by Arthur Pence. "Here," I said, pressing it into her hand. "This is for the shower. The budget is, well," Grant said not to have one. "Just make it fabulous. And please, don't bother me with receipts and spreadsheets. I trust you completely. Just handle it." I had just handed my best friend a shovel and pointed her toward a pit I had dug just for her. I knew her finances were a mess. Her influencer lifestyle was funded by debt and, as I now knew, by Grant. The temptation to skim, to inflate invoices from vendors and pocket the difference, would be irresistible. And every single fraudulent transaction would be logged by Arthur. With Blair happily occupied building her own gilded cage, I turned my attention to Grant. His ego was a simpler, more direct target. I approached him in his study one evening, carrying a file of fabricated documents I'd spent 2 days creating. "Grant, I need your expert help," I said, sitting down opposite his large mahogany desk. I explained that a wealthy former client, now a widow, wanted to make a significant 7-figure investment in Monroe Design to fund a new commercial projects division. "The thing is," I said, lowering my voice conspiratorially, "she wants to structure it in a way that's creative, to minimize her tax exposure." She mentioned something about offshore accounts and holding companies. "It's way over my head, but I thought of you. You're the only one I know who understands this complex stuff." Grant leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. A damsel in distress with a multi-million-dollar problem was irresistible to him. For the next hour, he excitedly sketched out a complex web of shell corporations and transfer protocols, a near-identical blueprint to the fraudulent system he was building to ruin me. "It's brilliant, honey," I said, my voice full of awe. "But I'll never remember all this. Could you please just type it up in an email for me? A step-by-step memo, so I can present it to my investor professionally? I don't want to sound like I don't know what I'm talking about." "Consider it done," he said, puffing out his chest. Already the hero of the hour, he was so blinded by his own perceived brilliance that he didn't realize he was meticulously documenting his own criminal playbook and emailing it directly to me. With the primary trap set, I began to subtly fray the cord that bound them together. After a lengthy phone call with a breathless Blair about caterers and florists, I went to Grant. "The shower is going to be amazing," I said with a worried frown. "But wow, Blair is really going all out. I think she mentioned her planning fee was going to be a percentage of the total budget. I'm a little concerned it's getting out of hand." I saw the instant flicker of annoyance in his eyes. The idea of Blair skimming from the money he already considered his was not part of their plan. To Blair, my approach was different. "Grant seems a little stressed about money," I'd confide to her over the phone. "He asked me if you were getting quotes from multiple vendors. You know how he is, Mr. Fiscal Responsibility." I told him not to worry, that you had everything under control. A seed of resentment was planted. Blair, the visionary, being questioned by Grant, the money man. While my enemies were busy being ensnared by their own greed and paranoia, I made my final strategic move. I cultivated an alliance with the most powerful woman in our neighborhood, Cynthia Davenport, the 4-time president of our homeowners association. Cynthia was the social queen bee, a woman whose opinion could make or break a family's reputation. I arranged to accidentally run into her at the local organic market. I gushed over her hydrangeas, asked for her advice on a charity committee I was thinking of joining, and listened with rapt attention as she detailed the scandalous marital affairs of a family on the next block. I made sure she saw me as I was, poised, gracious, and devoted to my coming child and the sanctity of our community. I was laying the groundwork, ensuring that when the time came, the most influential gossip in town would be firmly on my side. The web was woven, the flies were buzzing, fat and happy, right toward the center. While Blair was busy weaving her social tapestry for the baby shower, my own weavers were hard at work in the shadows, unraveling the threads of Grant's life. Catherine Croft had enlisted the best private investigator in the state, A man named Cole who was less of a detective and more of a ghost. He specialized in corporate espionage and moved through the digital and physical worlds without leaving a ripple. I never met him in person. Our communication was through Catherine. Our intelligence passed through secure, encrypted channels. His job was to verify my suspicions. He ended up confirming my darkest nightmares. The first report arrived a week after I set the baby shower trap. It was a simple, 2-page document, delivered to me by Catherine in her office. The subject line was, GS. Preliminary surveillance. I read it, my hands steady. Cole had spent 3 days tracking Grant's movements. The late nights at the office were a complete fabrication. His keycard data showed he left his building no later than 6:30 every evening. The Harrington account did not exist. Cole's financial sector sources confirmed that no such client was on the books at Grant's firm. Nor had there ever been. Grant's evenings were spent at expensive steakhouses and dimly lit cocktail bars in the city, always paying with a credit card I had never seen. On one of those nights, the night he'd claimed to be pulling an all-nighter, Cole had tracked him to a 5-star hotel near the airport, where he'd stayed for 3 hours before driving home. He was not with Blair. The report simply stated he met with an unidentified male contact. The lie that formed the foundation of his betrayal had been demolished in 72 hours. He wasn't a hard-working, soon-to-be father. He was a man with a secret life, and it was even more complex than I had imagined. The second report, a week later, focused on Blair. Cole had traced the financial history between them. It went back years. Grant hadn't just recently started helping her out, he had been her primary benefactor for over 3 years. He was the one who had paid the security deposit and co-signed the lease on her ridiculously overpriced uptown apartment. He had been making regular, 4-figure deposits into her personal bank account, categorized as consulting fees, since long before she'd launched her influencer brand. Theirs wasn't an affair that had blossomed from friendship. It was a long-standing financial arrangement that had evolved into a full-blown conspiracy. He had been investing in her, building his asset, long before he decided to liquidate me. Then came the bombshell. Cole's final report was delivered by Catherine with a grave expression on her face. "This is the motive, Audrey," she said, sliding a single sheet of paper across her desk. "This is the why." Cole's source within the financial industry had confirmed that the SEC had placed an informal inquiry on one of Grant's largest managed accounts, the billion-dollar portfolio of a tech mogul. The inquiry was for significant and unauthorized asset liquidation. Grant had been caught. He had gambled with his client's money and lost, creating a multi-million-dollar crater that he was legally and financially responsible for. He wasn't just trying to fund a new life with Blair, he was trying to steal my assets, my business, my entire net worth, to plug the hole in his professional life before the informal inquiry became a federal indictment. He was a cornered animal, and he was willing to sacrifice his wife and child to save his own skin. While Cole was excavating the secrets of Grant's life, Arthur Pence was meticulously following the money. He called me for a meeting in the same discreet conference room as before. He spread a series of spreadsheets and flow charts across the table. "Phase 1 of the audit is complete, Mrs. Monroe," he said, his voice flat. He pointed to the first sheet. "As you suspected, your friend, Miss Ashwood, is defrauding you. She has inflated invoices from the caterer, the florist, and the rental company for your party by an average of 30%. The vendors are paid the correct amount, and the overage is being kicked back to her personal account. So far, she has embezzled just over $8,000. It was petty, pathetic, and exactly what I had expected. But Arthur was just warming up. He slid a much larger, more complex chart in front of me. It was a map of my financial life for the past 3 years. "This," he said, tapping a section showing our joint investment accounts, "is where the real damage island Mr. Sterling has been systematically bleeding you. He's been using his discretionary authority over these accounts to make a series of high-risk trades. When they fail, he assigns the losses to the joint portfolio. When they succeed, he diverts the profits into a holding company." He paused and slid another document forward. "A holding company named Apex Lifestyle Ventures. My breath hitched. Apex Lifestyle Ventures, Arthur continued, is a shell corporation. Its sole purpose is to act as a pass-through. From there, the money has been moved to a dozen different accounts. He traced the lines on the chart with his finger, to pay the lease on Miss Ashwood's apartment, to purchase her new car, to fund the launch of her website and social media campaigns, to pay for her luxury vacations. He finally looked up at me. He hasn't just been stealing from you, Mrs. Monroe. He has been liquidating your shared future to build a life for his mistress. To date, I have tracked over $400,000. I looked at the charts, at the undeniable, mathematical proof of their long-running conspiracy. The evidence was no longer just grainy video from a nursery. It was a case file. It was bank statements and legal documents and surveillance reports. My team of investigators had delivered the truth. Now, it was up to me, the architect, to decide how to use it. The week leading up to the baby shower was a masterclass in organized chaos. Orchestrated by Blair. My home was a constant hub of activity. Florists debated shades of blush and cream in my foyer. Caterers presented miniature quiches in my dining room. And Blair swept through it all like a queen commanding her court. She had fully embraced her role as the visionary planner, a benevolent tyrant of taste. She treated me with a cloying, condescending kindness, frequently telling me to go lie down and not stress my pretty little head, all while making executive decisions with a flick of her wrist. She was drunk on the power, the attention, the perceived importance of it all. It was the grandest performance of her influencer life, and she was basking in the spotlight, completely blind to the fact that the stage I had built for her was a trapdoor. Grant, on the other hand, was fraying at the edges. The pressure from the SEC inquiry, which he thought was still a secret, was clearly taking its toll. His charm was wearing thin, his temper shorter. He was drinking more, his evenings filled with what he called investor calls but which I knew were hushed, frantic conversations with his lawyers. He was a man running out of time, and it was making him sloppy, arrogant, and desperate. The night before the shower, the house was finally quiet. The caterers were gone, the flowers were arranged, and the stage was set. Grant had come home late, smelling of scotch, and passed out in our bed almost immediately. My nightly ritual in the war room was about to begin, but I had a premonition, a deep, certain feeling that tonight was important. I opened the Nanny Cam app. The live feed was peaceful, but my interest was in the recorded history. I scrolled back to earlier that evening, around 8 p.m., when I had been upstairs taking a bath on Blair's antsy insistence that I relax. Emotion alert. I pressed play. The nursery door opened. Grant entered first, pacing the room like a caged animal. A moment later, Blair slipped in behind him, closing the door quietly. The air between them was thick with tension. "Is everything ready for tomorrow?" Grant asked, his voice a harsh whisper. "Of course it is," Blair snapped back. "Theatrics are my department, remember? Your only job is to play the doting husband. Can you manage that?" "Don't get cute with me, Blair," he growled. "This has to go perfectly. The SEC is turning up the heat. My lawyer said they could open a formal case any day now. We are out of time." He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking. "I need that capital from her business, and I need the investigation pointed squarely at her." Yesterday, he walked over to the crib, running a hand over the smooth ash wood. The very place they had betrayed me, now the setting for their final, fatal confession. "The beauty of the whole plan is the paper trail," he said, his confidence returning as he detailed his own genius. "I've spent months creating it. The documents I've falsified make it look like She was the one who set up Apex Ventures. It will look like she was siphoning her own client payments into a shell corp to dodge taxes. It's a classic case of a small business owner getting greedy." He turned to face her, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "As soon as the baby is born, when she's at her weakest, I make the anonymous call. I'll be the grieving husband who just discovered his wife's terrible secret. I'll hand-deliver my evidence to the SEC. They'll open a full-scale investigation into Audrey. She'll be so buried in legal fees, audits, and federal agents. She won't have the time or the money to fight me for custody or the business. We'll be free and clear. He had laid it all out. A clear, premeditated, and utterly evil plot to not only steal everything I had but to potentially send me to prison. He was going to frame me for his own crimes. Blair watched him, a slow, admiring smile spreading across her face. She reached out and touched his cheek. "And no one will ever suspect a thing," she breathed. She let out a low, cruel laugh. "Poor Audrey. She's so trusting. She never saw it coming. That was it. The final, perfect piece. The smoking gun." I watched the scene again, then a third time, my heart beating with a slow, steady, powerful rhythm. This wasn't about a broken heart anymore. This was about survival. About justice. This video wasn't just evidence of an affair. It was evidence of a criminal conspiracy, confessed by the perpetrators in the intended victim's nursery. I meticulously downloaded the file, saving it under a new name, the Finale. I transferred a copy to a new encrypted flash drive, which I held in the palm of my hand. It felt heavy, weighted with the power it contained. The evidence was complete. All the traps were set. The actors were in place. All that was left was for the curtain to rise on the final act, and I would be the one directing. The day of the baby shower dawned bright and painfully beautiful. My home, the stage for my vengeance, had been transformed by Blair into a pastel wonderland. Enormous bouquets of peonies and hydrangeas filled every corner, their sweet scent thick in the air. A string quartet played softly on the back patio. Waiters in crisp white jackets moved through the growing crowd, offering champagne and sparkling cider in delicate flutes. It was perfect. A perfect setting for a perfect lie. Our entire world was there. Friends from college, my most important clients, Grant's boss and his wife, and of course the social royalty of Plano. I saw Cynthia Davenport, the HOA president, holding court near the fireplace, her sharp eyes cataloging every detail. This was my audience. Grant and Blair were flawless in their roles. He was the epitome of the proud, adoring husband, one hand always resting on my back or my belly, his voice a low, constant murmur of affection. He accepted congratulations with a beaming smile, looking every bit the man who had everything. Blair, meanwhile, was the master of ceremonies, a whirlwind of grace and feigned selflessness. She flitted from group to group, accepting compliments on her vision, her face a perfect mask of humble pride. "Oh, it was nothing," she'd say with a wave of her hand, "anything for Audrey. She's my sister." I moved through the party in a serene, almost dreamlike state. I smiled. I accepted gifts. I thanked people for coming. I was the calm eye of the hurricane I had summoned. I felt their eyes on me. The happy, pitying glances for the poor, oblivious pregnant wife, and I absorbed it all, storing it as fuel. After an hour of mingling, Blair clinked a crystal glass for attention. The room fell silent. She stood in the center of the living room, glowing, triumphant. "If I could have everyone's attention," she began, her voice brimming with emotion. "I just want to say a few words about my best friend, Audrey." She turned to me, her eyes shining with manufactured tears. "Audrey, we have been through everything together. You are the most talented, generous, and beautiful soul I have ever known. You are more than a friend. You are the sister I chose. Seeing you now, so radiant and happy, about to become a mother, it's the greatest joy of my life." She raised her glass. "I cannot wait to be the best auntie in the world to sweet baby Rose, to Audrey and Grant." A chorus of, "To Audrey and Grant," echoed through the room. Grant pulled me close and kissed my cheek, whispering, "What a friend." I just smiled. When the applause died down, I gently extracted myself from Grant's embrace and stepped forward. "Thank you, Blair," I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying easily through the quiet room. "Thank you all so much for being here. It means the world to us." I looked around, making eye contact with my guests, with Cynthia, with Grant's boss, with Blair's own mother. This journey to motherhood has been so transformative. And there are two people, more than anyone, who have been instrumental in preparing me for this next chapter. Grant, and of course, Blair. Grant and Blair preened. I wanted to do something special to thank them, to thank all of you, I continued. So, I put together a little video. It's a sort of behind-the-scenes look at our preparations for Rose's arrival. A tribute, really. A murmur of delighted approval went through the crowd. My assistant, following the instructions I had given her that morning, dimmed the lights from a control panel in the hall. All eyes turned to the massive 85-inch television mounted above the fireplace. Grant squeezed my hand, his expression one of proud anticipation. Blair stood beside him, her smile plastered on her face, ready to receive her public adoration. The screen flickered on. The first image was a beautiful, professionally shot photo of the nursery. Serene and perfect. A collective awe rippled through the audience. The image held for 3 seconds, then abruptly cut to black. The next image was grainy, shot from a high corner angle, in the dim glow of a nightlight. It was the nursery. But it wasn't empty. It was a jerky, shocking shot of Grant and Blair, in the crib. A collective, audible gasp sucked the air out of the room. Before anyone could fully process the visual, before a single whisper could start, the screen went black again. The show wasn't about the visuals. It was about the audio. Blair's voice, sharp and whining, filled the dead silence of the room. Asterisk. I'm getting impatient, Grant. I thought she'd have had a full-blown meltdown by now. Asterisk. A stunned silence. Someone dropped a glass, the sound shattering the quiet. Then, Grant's voice, low and confident. Asterisk. Patience. B. After Rose is born, the sleep deprivation, the stress, it'll be easy to make her look unstable. We'll have a mountain of evidence that she's an unfit, unstable mother. Asterisk. Blair's mother made a small, strangled sound. Grant's boss took a half step back from him, his face a mask of disgust. Grant's voice again, dripping with condescending arrogance. Asterisk. The beauty of the whole plan is the paper trail. The documents I falsified make it look like She Times was the one who set up Apex Ventures. When I make the anonymous call to the SEC, I'll give them everything they need to open a full-scale investigation into Audrey. Asterisk. The final sound was the most damning of all. It was Blair, letting out a low, cruel laugh. A sound of pure, triumphant malice. Asterisk. Poor Audrey. She's so trusting. She never saw it coming. Asterisk. The audio cut out. The screen remained black. The silence that followed was absolute. A heavy, suffocating blanket of pure horror. Every eye in the room was now fixed on the two people standing beside me. I turned my head slowly. The color had drained from Grant's face, his proud smile replaced by a slack-jawed expression of disbelief and terror. Blair was frozen, her hand still holding her champagne flute. Her face a grotesque mask of shock, the fake tears of her speech now mingling with the real terror in her eyes. The tribute was complete. The public execution had just begun. The silence in the room stretched for an eternity, thick and suffocating. Then it shattered. The first sound was the sharp crack of flesh on flesh. Blair's mother, a woman who normally radiated quiet suburban grace, had crossed the room in 3 quick strides and slapped her daughter hard across the face. The second sound was a collective gasp from 50 guests. The third was the icy voice of Grant's boss, Mr. Abernathy, who looked at Grant with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Sterling," he said, his voice low but carrying across the room, "you're done." That's when Grant finally snapped out of his paralysis. His face, which had been a deathly white, contorted into a mask of rage. "It's a fake," he roared, lunging toward the coffee table, scrambling for the remote control. "She faked it. It's all fake. She's insane, can't you see? It's the pregnancy. She's been paranoid and unstable for months. I have proof." He was shouting the script he had written for me, the narrative he and Blair had so carefully crafted in the nursery. But the words were hollow, pathetic in the face of the evidence everyone had just heard. He was a cornered animal, baring its teeth, but no one was afraid. They were just disgusted. He found the remote and pointed it at the screen, his hands shaking. But before he could press a button, the front door opened. It was as if a director had called it. Standing in the grand entryway was Catherine Croft, my attorney. She was flanked by 2 uniformed Plano police officers, their expressions neutral, their presence an immediate and overwhelming shift in the room's power dynamic. They weren't there to arrest anyone. Catherine had explained this was a civil standby, a measure to prevent a breach of the peace. But their presence radiated authority. Catherine's eyes swept the room, taking in the scene with a cool, appraising glance. "Grant Sterling?" she asked, her voice cutting through his frantic yelling. He froze, the remote still in his hand, and stared at her. A younger woman in a sharp suit, who had entered behind Catherine, stepped forward, holding 2 thick manila envelopes. "Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice devoid of emotion as she extended the first envelope to him. "You have been served." He stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. She then turned to Blair, who was still standing, catatonic, holding a hand to her reddened cheek. "Blair Ashwood," the process server said, handing her the second envelope. "You have been served." In his hands, Grant held a petition for divorce, citing adultery and conspiracy to commit fraud, along with an emergency protective order, legally barring him from coming within 500 feet of me or our home. Blair was holding a multi-million-dollar civil lawsuit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, conspiracy, and tortious interference with a contract, naming her, her LLC, and Apex Lifestyle Ventures. It was all there, the opening salvo of their legal annihilation, delivered in front of everyone they had ever wanted to impress. While this drama unfolded, a different kind of execution was taking place. I saw Cynthia Davenport, the HOA president, standing near the back of the room, her face a mixture of shock and undisguised glee. She hadn't moved to leave. Instead, her phone was out, her thumbs a blur across the screen. She was the first domino. I watched as, one by one, other guests discreetly pulled out their own phones. A quiet epidemic of typing filled the room. The story of what had just happened was spreading from this house like a digital contagion, lighting up the text threads and private Facebook groups of our entire community. The judgment of their peers, the currency by which they lived and died, was being rendered in real time. The party dissolved into a frantic, hushed exodus. Guests fled, not wanting to be caught in the blast radius of such a spectacular social detonation. They avoided looking at me, at Grant, at Blair. They just wanted out. Within minutes, the house was nearly empty, leaving only the wreckage. Half-eaten plates of food, abandoned champagne flutes, and the suffocating scent of ruined lives. The police officers calmly explained to Grant that, due to the protective order, he needed to vacate the premises immediately. They would escort him. He started to protest, his voice cracking. But one look at Catherine's unyielding face and the officer's stoic expressions, and he deflated. He was led out of the front door of the home he had tried to steal. A disgraced, defeated man with nothing but a lawsuit in his hand. Blair was a ghost, pale and trembling, led away by her horrified, weeping mother. And then there was silence. I stood alone in the center of my beautiful, violated living room. Catherine walked over to me. "Phase 4 is complete," she said quietly. I nodded, my hand resting on my stomach. There was no joy, no triumph, just the quiet, profound satisfaction of a complex design, perfectly executed. The social execution was over. Grant and Blair were now pariahs, their names turning to poison on the lips of everyone they knew. And the legal execution was just beginning. The days that followed the baby shower were not chaotic. They were brutally, efficiently, methodical. The public execution had been the spectacle. What came next was the slow, systematic dismantling. My war room became a communications hub, where I received updates from Catherine, who was now quarterbacking a multi-front legal assault. Grant and Blair's initial response was a panicked, flailing attempt at denial. Their lawyers, hired in haste, sent out blustering letters threatening defamation suits. Catherine's response was simple. She sent them a single, password-protected video file. The unedited, hour-long recording of the final nursery conversation, complete with a copy of Arthur Pence's preliminary accounting report. The blustering stopped. Their defenses crumbled into dust before they were even built. No lawyer would or could build a case on such a foundation of lies. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was absolute. On Monday morning, less than 48 hours after the party, Catherine Croft hand-delivered a package to the Dallas Regional Office of the Securities and Exchange Commission. It contained a copy of the final video, Arthur's full forensic analysis tracing my stolen money to Blair, and the pièce de résistance, the detailed email Grant had sent me, outlining exactly how to commit the very fraud he was perpetrating. It was a confession, a motive, and a step-by-step manual, all tied up in a neat digital bow. The SEC's informal inquiry into Grant became a full-blown federal investigation overnight. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic for him. On Tuesday, his firm issued a public statement announcing his immediate termination for gross professional misconduct. By Wednesday, the SEC had successfully petitioned a federal judge to freeze all of Grant's known assets. His bank accounts, his trading portfolios, his entire financial world turned to ice. He couldn't even afford his high-priced lawyers anymore. Within a week, the news broke that a federal grand jury was being convened. He wasn't just facing financial ruin, he was facing a future in a federal prison. Blair's annihilation was more public and, in some ways, more vicious. The story, now dubbed Showergate by the local gossip blogs, was the only thing anyone in our circle was talking about. Audio snippets from the video, likely recorded by a guest on their phone, had leaked. Her carefully curated social media empire was besieged. Brands that had paid her thousands to hold their products sent out press releases, tripping over themselves to sever all ties. Her comment sections, once a stream of fawning praise, became a raging torrent of disgust and hatred. Her followers vanished in droves. Her career, a fragile construct of filters and fake smiles, was obliterated in a single weekend. Then, my lawsuit landed. Catherine's civil suit was a work of art, systematically targeting every asset Blair had. The lawsuit successfully argued that her entire business had been funded with stolen money, and the court agreed. What little she had left was attached to pay the judgment against her. She was forced to sell her car and her designer clothes. She was evicted from the apartment Grant had funded. The last I heard, she was legally bankrupt, a social ghost forced to move back into her parents' spare bedroom. Her influencer dreams reduced to a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. My divorce was less a battle and more an unconditional surrender. We didn't even see a courtroom. The meeting took place in Catherine's sterile conference room. Grant sat across the table, a ghost of the man he once was. He was thin, pale, and flanked by a court-appointed lawyer who looked exhausted. He didn't make eye contact. He just signed the papers Catherine pushed in front of him. He signed away any and all claim to the house. He signed away any claim to my business, Monroe Design Firm. He signed away any claim to the funds in the irrevocable trust I had established for our daughter. He agreed to my demand for sole, uncontested legal and physical custody of Rose, with his parental rights to be terminated pending his criminal conviction. He signed it all, his hand moving like a tired automaton. He had no leverage. He had no choice. He had been so sure of his plan to take everything from me, and in the end, he walked away with nothing but the clothes on his back and the prospect of a prison sentence. There was one final piece of legal architecture to install. This is the most important part, Catherine told me as she prepared the final document. This protects you and Rose, forever. It was a permanent, mutual gag order and injunction. It legally forbade Grant and Blair from ever speaking, writing, or communicating publicly about me or my daughter for the rest of their lives. They could not write a book, give an interview, or post on social media about what had happened. It was a legally binding sentence of silence, ensuring they could never again try to profit from my pain or poison my daughter's life with their toxicity. Grant signed it without a word. Blair's lawyer, working pro bono, had her sign it a day later. The war was over. The annihilation was complete. It wasn't a loud, fiery victory. It was the quiet, satisfying click of a well-oiled machine doing its work, of a perfectly designed plan reaching its logical, inevitable conclusion. 6 months later, the world was reborn. The Texas sun, once a harsh, interrogating glare, now streamed through the nursery window with a soft, gentle warmth. I sat in the rocking chair. The quiet, rhythmic creak, a soothing counterpoint to the gentle breaths of the baby sleeping in my arms. Rose. My Rose. Her tiny hand was curled around my finger, her face serene in a way that only the truly innocent can be. The room was different now. After the dust had settled, the first thing I had done was gut the old nursery. I'd ripped out the carpet, torn down the mural, and sold the crib. It was an exorcism. In its place, I had built a garden. The walls were now covered in a sweeping mural of a sun-drenched wildflower field, alive with color and buzzing with painted honeybees. The new crib was made of warm, golden oak, and the mobile above it was a collection of brilliant, hand-blown glass hummingbirds. The room was no longer a quiet, moonlit promise. It was a loud, joyful, sun-drenched declaration of a new day. This was our sanctuary now, built not on naive dreams, but on unbreakable strength. My phone buzzed softly on the table beside me. It was a text from Catherine. It was the final update I had been waiting for, the last loose thread in a tapestry I had long since finished. Asterisk for your information, asterisk it read. Asterisk Grant Sterling officially accepted a plea bargain this morning. 7 years in federal prison. Eligible for parole in 4. Blair Ashwood's lawsuit was settled last week. She signed the final non-disclosure agreement. Last known address is with her parents in Plano. Asterisk. I read the message once, then deleted the thread. It felt like reading a footnote from a history book, a passage about a war that had ended so long ago the combatants were just names on a page. They were no longer villains in my story. They were just gone. Relics of a life I no longer lived. Architects of a ruin from which I had already built a paradise. My own life, in contrast, had bloomed. The story of what had happened at the baby shower had become a quiet legend in Dallas business circles. I never spoke of it, but the tale had been told by others, morphing from scandalous gossip into a testament to quiet, calculated strength. My brand was no longer just about impeccable design. It was about resilience. Last month, Monroe design firm had landed the biggest contract of its career, overseeing the interior architecture of a new boutique hotel chain opening across the Southwest. They hadn't just hired a designer. They had hired a woman who, when faced with demolition, had proven she knew how to rebuild an empire from the foundations up. I looked down at Rose, her chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of sleep. I thought about the woman I had been a year ago, so full of love and a trust so profound it had been a blind spot. Grant and Blair hadn't destroyed that woman. They had simply burned away the parts of her that were no longer needed, revealing the steel underneath. They thought my strength was my weakness, that my methodical nature was predictable. They never understood that a true architect knows that before you can build something new and lasting, you must first have a clear, unflinching understanding of the old structure and all its flaws. I looked around the beautiful sunlit room, this new sanctuary. There was no sadness here. There was no lingering ghost of betrayal. There was only pride, a deep, quiet pride in the woman I had been forced to become. A woman who had faced the ultimate desecration of her sacred space, and had responded not by crumbling, but by meticulously designing and executing the demolition of those who had wronged her, clearing the way for something better. I didn't just survive, I rebuilt. A soft smile touched my lips as Rose stirred in her sleep, nuzzling closer to me. The sun cast a warm glow across her face. This was my vindication. Not the prison sentences or the public disgrace of my enemies. It was this peace, this quiet moment, in this beautiful room, with this perfect child in my arms. It was the knowledge that I had faced the very worst of human nature, and had not only protected my daughter from it, but had built her a world where she would only ever know love, strength, and the brilliant, unwavering light of the Sunday.